Hi, this is Ast3rix and welcome back to my channel. So today we're further doing more experimentation with Reason 11 VST with Ableton Live 10. So I continue to explore the VST and I am like really digging into the rack extensions. So in this episode, I'm going to walk you through a track that I put together using the Reason rack along with some of the other VSTs that I normally use with some loops and some drum stuff, and I've got some box tracks in there too. So what I've been doing lately is experimenting with more musical kinds of sounds. Which is why I've been really focusing hard on the guitar. When you add guitar, and especially rhythm guitar, it really gives it like a really fullness and melodicness that makes it really sound like a song per se. So I've been really focusing on making my music sound more musical and less loopy. And I think that's something we all kind of struggle with when you start working with loops and samples and that kind of stuff. You get trapped into this pigeonhole where you're doing things consistently, but it's repetitive. And loops cannot be altered to the point to where you can make it sound musical sometimes. Sometimes you're dealing with things that are static, like in one specific melody pattern. You could cut it up, and if you're really good at it, you can really change and alter the keys that it's played in, but ultimately it doesn't quite always sound the way the original instrument sounded, because then you're changing not only the note pitch, you're changing the timing of the way that the sample sounds. So you have to really be creative sometimes with them. And I, again, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I actually am a keyboardist. I play piano and I've been playing since I was like 15. So I don't have a problem with being able to play. That's not my issue. My issue is consistently coming up with new ideas. So as a pianist or somebody who knows how to play the piano, what you find is every time you sit down in front of the keyboard, you get comfortable with what your playing style is. So your fingers get used to playing a specific way. So you get locked into the same keys, the same melodies, the same rhythms, the same patterns. So in order for you to break yourself out of that, you have to really do different things to mix that up. And if any other people out in the audience can agree with what I'm saying, please leave comments, thoughts. Because I know that I've run into a lot of people who have stated they have that issue sometimes. It's not necessarily a problem, but you want to kind of have some dynamics, some differences with your music and what you're doing from a creative standpoint. So that's the reason why I adopted doing more loop-based stuff and piano parts and melodies and that kind of thing. It just gives me an opportunity to be more creative from a creativity standpoint. And you know, it really bothers me when you have all these different factions in the music industry that are against sampling still. Back in the days of when hip hop started, when it first began, people were all excited about people using samples from old records. And of course, there was always the copyright infringement thing. But I think as we've progressed forward in using samples, everybody's using samples in a different way. They're not necessarily sampling from old records as much because of all the copyright issues. They're using royalty-free things, or actually sampling themselves. Like they'll create libraries of just melodies or parts or pieces, and they just use those samples of their own stuff. And that's great. If you have started that process of building your own self-sampling repository. That's a really cool idea and a really good way to keep yourself from getting trapped in some of the copyright stuff. Sometimes it's really difficult with some of the more prominent services like Splice and Loop Masters and Sounds.com to really determine if the samples that you're getting are truly royalty free, or if it's somebody's interpolation of a song that they've heard before. It's getting to the point to where we can no longer really trust what we're getting. So you just kind of have to be more creative with use of your samples. Sometimes I when I'm sitting down, I'm listening to things and looking through my library. I really like the way that the original sample went, and I really am trying to break myself out of that so that I can still use it, but make it more original to me by changing it up, or doing more things to make it not sound like the original. So again, it's just about being creative and using the tools that we've been given. And that's one of the reasons why I really like Ableton, because Ableton is super, super duper flexible with the warping. And I get away with a lot of weird stuff that I probably wouldn't have been if I was still using Reason. Well, number one, Reason doesn't support direct wave file dumping into the sequencer. You have to have it in Rex format, which is time consuming, and I never got into like truly trying to keep the Rex libraries, because I always knew that that wasn't what I really wanted. Even though I went ahead and there were some times I would do a Rex of something that I was working on, but it was just too time consuming to consistently do it. But anyway, so let's just go ahead and take a look at this track and let's just get started. So, okay, with this track, I started out with the bass. And that's normally not where I start. Again, lately this is super experimental stuff, and I just let my creativity take me where it's going to take me. So I started with the bass, and I doubled up some bass sounds. So I'm using a Thor, and I'm using a monotone bass synthesizer, which is new to me. I was really, really liking some of the core sounds that are within the library in this particular RE. And I may have to go back and revisit this, but what I did was I combined it with this analog triangle, and let me just show you what it's doing. So it's really, really loud, really muffly kind of sound, which is unusual for bass. And again, this is Experimental Sunday. We're just experimenting. It doesn't always mean that it turns out great. Sometimes it's so unique that it's unmixable. And I've been struggling with mixing this one because it's so unusual. So I may end up altering it on the end product just so that I can get it to fit in the mix better. But I used unfiltered audio, which is another one of my really favorite plugins. This is the Spec Ops. I'm using a patch called Amplitude Freeze. And from there, I am using the FabFilter Saturn. It's like my favorite plugin for adding oomph to bass, to the kicks. So I'm using the 808 Designer, and I have my band 2 level at a negative 4.64, and I bumped the bass end up to 9.86. And from there, let's get out of there. I am using Cthulhu by Ast3rix, and I'm using an ARP out of the Cthulhu. And this is just a kind of a basic ARP. pattern, and I have it doing the art for the processed pianos. So processed pianos is one of those new REs that I'm new to with a reason, and I'm using a patch called Pluck of the Draw. And I also added a polyverse wider and just gave it a little bit more stereo imaging. And let me just play for you what that's doing. I also added another unfiltered audio triad, and I'm using a patch called Scattered Odd to give it a little bit of a different kind of a sound. Okay, from there, let's see. I am using a sample, and the sample is doing this. Let's just see what this thing is doing. So it's a bell. So, but I added an unfiltered audio triad, and I'm using a patch called Trap and Grind Bass Dirt Odd, and it's giving it kind of a grainy kind of a sound. And I added a Sound Toys little plate, and I have my settings. I was using a patch called the Perfect Plate, but then I changed it to 4 and 1. And I have the mix turned over a little bit 1 o'clock, and I bumped off some of the lows off to the left here about the 11 o'clock position, and that's what I did with that sound. From there, I started messing with the drums. So the drums are a little different in this one. So I'm using a hi-hat, and on the hi-hat I decided I wanted to switch it up a little bit and not have it be static all the way through. So I'm using the looperator for that, and I'm using the ultra staccato in the looperator, and I put a UAD limiter on it so that it kind of control the overall volume so it doesn't get too loud in the mix. And I'm using a shaper box, and I'm using a rhythmic pan. So I've got a rhythmic pan pattern in there, so it'll give it some life, and it gives it that rhythmic pattern from left to right side of the speaker. Okay, from there I just got a basic kick. Well, that's not a kick. Basic kick and a snare. And it has like a little offset snare pattern to it, and I've got that going through the UAD API, and I'm using the compressed kick so that it'll give it a little bit more oomph. And I've got a separate snare to double up the snares, so it makes it have more of an impact with the snare sounds. From there, I added a vocal, and we'll save that to last. I did my normal stuff to that one. I put the Shep's Omni channel on it and the manipulator. The manipulator is by Polyverse. I'm using a patch called John, and I have it set to 29%. It gives it a kind of a growly effect behind the lead vocal, so it almost makes it sound like there's a secondary vocal behind it. I'm using a guitar sample in there, and it is doing this. Well, hold on, I gotta get to it. Alright, so let's get back there. So I have that going through the Guitar Rig 5, and I'm using a patch in there called Transgate, and I have the Pan Man in there, and I have it set to doing Dinah Where It Be, so it's bouncing back and forth between the speakers. And then I'm using a Fab Filter Pro Q3 to kind of knock off the low end. All right, and then I've got another Vox, and that's it. So that's it for this Sunday's Experimental Sunday. And again, I've been really enjoying the new Reason Rack VST. I didn't realize how much I really missed some of these sounds. Going back through and messing with Thor was fun again. Getting reintroduced to it. I haven't used it in a long time, so it's like if you haven't used something in a long time, it's like relearning something and it's become new again. So spending more time with revisiting some of the older REs. It's a lot of fun, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm hoping that Reason Studios comes out with a patch for some of the little glitchy things that I've been kind of experiencing. I noticed that I've had a lot of weird instability with my Ableton since I installed the Reason VST. Anywhere from like crashes periodically, which Ableton has a built-in backup feature, and it saved me a few times from that, where things like it'll like be crashing right in the middle of a session. And you reopen it and it'll ask you if you want to restore the session where it ended. And I've been saved by that a couple of times, but I've noticed it's been really unstable, quite a bit unstable since I installed the Reason Rack. I know I've already reported this to the Reason Studio guys through the board already, and I know they're probably busy working on all of the other things that are that need to be done. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that they'll come up with some sort of patch release here soon so that I can get a little bit more stability out of it, because that's the only thing that's, that's not fun about it. Other than that, it's been great being able to get back in there and build all the sounds. I didn't realize, how much of a sound design tool it really could be because of all these great rack extensions. I'm really excited about it again, and being able to get in there and use some of the things that I haven't messed with before. And I've still been needing to mess with the Scenic Hybrid instrument. That's something I haven't touched yet. And I'll just keep going forward with this. And the Complex is actually pretty cool too. I'm really excited about that. The Complex 1 modular, that's brand new to me. But yeah, I'm really enjoying Reason Rack. Again, it's like being reintroduced to an old friend again. And that's all I've got, guys. I'll see you on next Sunday.
Ast3rix music, the invasion has begun.
Like we really took a beat down. I wanna ride to the beats down and pick it up and then take it to the streets. Wow, it's been a long time since I felt so cold. I could've swore it was the winter. So hug me, love me, tease me, squeeze me, tempt me. Psychic vampires are draining me till I'm empty. When you don't come around. Fallen trees got branches, but I'm tired of snitches. Ridiculous to keep giving them second chances. I don't know how to feel, but I feel I'm losing. The byproduct of all the craziness that I'm choosing. And what I need, I feel like I'll never get. But what I don't need is you watching my every step. It might be time to let me go. Make up your mind and let me know.